Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and we are here with Appleseed. This, of course, is the OVA from 1988. This is an example of an anime where, if you never heard of the even heard of the concept of anime, your mind would be blown.
Very much so. This is basically cyberpunk, but with less punk and more cyber. Very different from what we were seeing in the time.
Now, I've only seen one version of this. This is the manga entertainment version. I believe this is the 480p DVD that was released at some point. I watched it in the original Japanese language with the subtitles.
I ended up rewatching all three versions of the US distribution. The manga release, which is a 2004 one, the original 1993 VHS, which I conveniently am going through storage, so I had access to that one, and the most recent release, sub and dub on both.
So, looks like Reignick here is a little more prepared than I am. Now, I discovered this anime literally this year as well. I did a lot of stuff this year. Just looking at some different... I wanted some sci-fi anime, and this is something that popped up. Now, I initially didn't look at it because of the name Appleseed. It's like, what the hell is Appleseed even supposed to mean?
Funny thing about that, it actually has multiple meanings in this. The two obvious ones are one for the setting and an alliteration, or rather not alliteration, but rather a translation of the concept of Johnny Appleseed, basically bringing growth where they go.
And that's where you gotta love anime, because they take stuff like this random concept of Johnny Appleseed, and turn it into an entire universe. And it works.
Shall we dive in and cover the world first, or how do you want to take this?
Let's just go through the film itself, since this is ostensibly a review, and then we'll just go into the background information and things of that nature afterwards. Because it's not a very long movie. It's only an hour and 6 minutes. A little longer than Black Magic M66, but not that much longer. But it's still just as dense as Black Magic was.
Very much so. All right, we begin this film in media res, meaning the world is already somewhat established. We actually begin with a scene of a woman with her pet bird in her hands, sitting in a rather fancy and expensive studio apartment in a rather nice-looking city. From there, we see her release the bird, claiming that she wants to be free. Seconds later, her husband comes in, and she jumps from the roof.
That right there is actually a very interesting hook, because for 1998, that was something that wasn't really seen altogether that much in like an anime would have been. You know, especially if this was like your first anime, it's like, holy shit, what's going on here?
Yeah, it definitely... They realize that they've only got so much time to tell a story, so they very, very quickly set the pace of it just by saying, okay, this world is not exactly the paradise it seems.
And then on the version I have, there's this little Star Wars-esque crawl that sets up the world itself, which we'll just briefly touch on the world and what's going on.
Okay, essentially, after years upon years of conflict, the world has descended into another world war. Now, a world war of this scale isn't going to end with an armistice treaty or anything like that. It's going to end up with a degree of mutually assured destruction. The good news is the war wasn't fought with nukes. It wasn't, an absolute nuclear hellhole. It wasn't fought with conventional nukes. Most of the world is actually broken up into several empires. We get to see it from the Empire of Olympus.
And a new city called Sanctuary was built for what remained of humanity. And we have biodroids, half human, half robots, that are indistinguishable from humans. And they're the ones that control all of that particular city.
Well, 80% of it anyway.
Now, of course, when you first start seeing this, they don't actually explain that until, like, towards the midpoint of the film.
Right, the indistinguishable from human part's the important part. Uh, the thing is, like, this is a post-apocalyptic tale, but the world's not quite as crapsack as most apocalyptic tales are.
The city itself is pretty nice. It's a futuristic, cyberpunkish city, but everything outside of it is just completely destroyed. And
Yes and no. All of the major metros are. Not the entire world, just the major metros. All the strategic targets have been destroyed.
which is still pretty bad.
Very much so.
Because that means I'd be dead, assuming I was not dead of old age by this point. But that aside, the hook for the film is there's some terrorists holding some hostages in one of these buildings. It's a very 80s terrorist kind of thing as well.
Yeah, this is where we start to see the first difference between the subs and dubs over the ages. The manga release in 2004 adds a few one-liners from our terrorists, as well as some reactions here and there, which are not exactly true to the original translation. But it's not jarring, and it does actually fit in with how a terrorist pressed against the wall would speak.
One thing that's actually kind of... This is where the detailing in animes created by the... I can't remember his name.
Masamune Shiro.
That guy. I couldn't even pronounce it even if I tried. The detailing is insane. Now, most of you won't care, but I do, and Rain does as well. When the film starts up, they're sending in some cops to try to shoot the terrorists. Now, they all fail and they all get shot. But when they're loading up their various guns, they actually show that, I believe it's a MAC-10, that is an open bolt.
Correct.
It's like... That little if you don't know anything about guns, you won't care. But if you do, it's like, holy crap, they remembered.
The detail is definitely here. You can tell that Shiro had a hand in the art design. The SWAT team that is sent in after the undercover team fails, mowed down by an entrenched, bloody mounted machine gun.
Yeah, they weren't going to stand a chance on that one. That actually kind of shocked me when I first saw it. I was like, I expected it to be like a little shootout, but nope, just boom, dead.
Yeah, that's normally the undercover cops going in were pretty well set on this. I mean, they even had electronic door lock pick. I mean, they weren't going in thinking, "Oh, we're just going to Rambo this." No, they actually tried to follow procedure before they were eradicated.
Yeah.
We then cut to a scene of a hovercraft moving in, as well as the other teams. And smartly for this time, there's actually multiple use of multiple SWAT snipers from various vantage points, each one armed with an HK PSG-1.
And if you know nothing about guns, it won't mean anything to you, but if you do, it's like, holy crap. Now, the guns you should start to recognize are the 1911s and the MP, not MMPs, MP5s.
Right. The SWAT team is equipped like a traditional, high-end SWAT team of the time, or of our time, at that time, would be.
Now, of course, this is supposed to be the future, but whatever, you just kind of got to ignore that.
Well, it can kind of be explained away in the fact that even right now, we're at a kind of an arms race, plateau. There's things we can do to the external of the gun, but there's not much we can do to improve the performance of the guns we have.
That's kind of true. I mean, you can add optics, but that's about it.
And when most of your unit is, your heavy hitters of the unit already have built-in optics, it kind of makes the point in your moot.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that it does kind of stand out with Appleseed here, is you got this kind of traditional SWAT team, then you start to see like some robot or some mechs standing around, and then you got Brierios, or however you pronounce his name.
Brierios Hecaton-Kyries. His name, the Hecaton-Kyries part is actually not his last name. That's actually the designation of the chassis he is in. He is human, although you wouldn't be able to tell it from looking at him because most of that is metallic chassis.
Yeah. So you see this traditional SWAT team dropping out of this futuristic sci-fi chopper. Then you got that guy on there. It's like, he does kind of stick out. It's explained later on. But it's like, wait, when did RoboCop with giant ears show up?
Well, it is a bit unusual if you're not used to it and don't know what you're getting into, but the giant ears are actually explained. They house multiple sensor arrays as well as cameras, which does come into play about right now. He uses one of those camera arrays to look around the corner without endangering himself.
Which is very fancy. And then we, of course, get a really good close up at the 1911 when our second main character, Duran,
Dunan Newt. But to be fair, the spelling is pretty out there.
yeah, I'll say. She ends up capturing one of the terrorists leaving the building. Now, a short time earlier before he gets captured, he burns this random set of blueprints for this spider tank. That's not going to be important. Or is it?
Foreshadowing.
So he, of course, gets arrested. Then they bust in and shoot all the terrorists. It's actually a pretty interesting shootout, mainly because it's handled quite realistically.
All lanes are covered. When they actually shot this scene, they thought to actually think of the dimensionality of the room as well as proper procedure. Main team on ground level launches in a CS gas grenade to cover for them. They burst in. They give them a chance to drop their weapons. They don't take it, so most of them get gunned down. One of them takes impromptu cover behind a table, and as soon as he pops out, one of those snipers takes him out.
That's another one of those scenes where it's like, holy shit, they actually know what they're doing. Because it's really well shot. He pops out and just, you think one of the main characters is going to shoot him. Nope, just boom, dead.
After this gunfight, we get a moment of calm as the hostages, are released, and then we hear a second gunshot. This is not good.
And the two mains go and try to investigate. They find one of their friends dead on the ground. And then it seems like Matsumune here is a big fan of booby traps because, like in Black Magic M66, they end up tripping a booby trap. This actually happens a couple times in the film. It sets off a grenade and injures Briarios.
A little bit. Basically, he's lucky enough to catch it. The spoon's already... Basically, it's a wire trip grenade trap. Yanks it off of the stairwell that it's attached to, throws it down, and catches quite a bit of flak to the back of his armor.
And since it's a big fuck-off robot, it doesn't hurt him that much, but still. It's
enough to hurt, but not that bad, yeah.
And that actually, I think that becomes sort of a plot point later on.
Actually, it does, but in a different way.
So, of course, they leave the building. They're pissed off, that one of their compatriots got killed. Because only, one guy, actually, 3 guys died. 3 of the SWAT team actually died. But so, the body counts for, the good guys in these Matsumune shows generally are actually pretty low, surprisingly enough.
Well, it's from the fact that he writes, most of the militarized and law enforcement professionals as actual professionals. They're going to watch absolutely every corner they know. If they think there's a trap there, chances are there's a trap there.
So no red shirting. So one of the terrorists that escaped shows up at this guy named Colin's house, saying that he lost all his men, but that he got what he was going after.
Right. The entire incident was actually a cover ploy. The bald, seemingly eye patch, was actually a cybernetic augmentation individual who decided to go to the bathroom as opposed to staying with the terrorists and getting shot up. Basically used that as a chance to get away from the crime with what he needed, the information. All the hostages were taken simply for the fact that he could get the information from that location. That was the only reason for it.
And so then we cut back to the SWAT HQ. You got Briarios discussing a few things. And one of the things about the SWAT facility here, you can definitely tell this is an 80s film because what you end up seeing is a lot of... Okay, you got Briarios here. He's half human, half machine, right? Then you got Duran here, typing out her police report on a typewriter.
Well, it's actually they there is a screen to it. It's set off to the side. It's really more of like a really high-end word processor with a pseudo-futuristic monitor. I would say pseudo-futuristic because remember, this is 88. Everything back then was CRT. So this is a little bit thinner than a CRT. Not by much, though. Don't expect LCD panels here.
It's still hilarious, though. It's like a word processor. Most of the audience watching this won't even know what a word processor even is. Because, like, they'll know what a typewriter is. Oh, it's one of those mechanical, computers, right? But a word processor, which is sort of a step up, it's a step between a typewriter and a computer. It has no means of computing, but you can type on it.
Right. Your software suite is very limited. There's no real operating system. It's screen, usually a small screen. Like, we're not talking, oh, this is 1080p. This is great. No, we're talking like you've got about 178 by 275 lines of text.
And that was high tech at one point. Just keep that in mind. That was considered a major upgrade over a typewriter because you could actually backspace and stuff like that.
Yeah, you could actually correct your mistakes before printing it out.
So basically, the entire SWAT scene is just them getting some preliminary information about what was going on, who was doing what, and Duran is talking about transferring to special circumstances because she wants to keep investigating the death of one of her friends.
Right, she's pretty affected by the death of one of her allies, and thankfully, through Briaris's camera relays, they actually find out who this terrorist is.
Now, what's kind of funny, though, is even on the second viewing, I forgot who his name was. This is a very dense...
Okay. His name is AJ Sebastian.
Because, like, when we finally got to the point where, like, yeah, we're going to track down AJ Sebastian, it's like, who the fuck was that? So if you blink, you can miss a lot of detail.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it moves fast and expects you to keep up. If you can't keep up, rewatch.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. It does stand out to multiple rewatchings, but you gotta pay attention. So after that, we get introduced to a woman named Hitomi. And now it's not the Hitomi you might be thinking of. Turns out she's like, sort of like a futuristic immigration officer kind of thing. She helps people from the bad side, or the destroyed pieces of the world, immigrate into the city of Olympus.
Right. Essentially, she's a liaison. It is revealed later on that she is a biodroid. She's basically a genetically engineered human whose role specifically is in public relations. We find out that during, in this particular scene, that she's attending a party for all the people she's helped import into Olympus. This includes Dune and Newt and Briarios. Now, she does get a bit drunk.
Yeah, but we'll get to that in a minute. Because after her scene is introduced, we get introduced to not really a villain, but certainly somebody that's not necessarily nice, which is the Governor General of the city, and she's complaining about all these new people being brought into the city and stuff like that. I don't think it's trying to make like an immigration message or anything.
No, it's actually not. The reason why she's upset about bringing people in is this is Athena, and she actually, while you wouldn't be able to tell, is a first-generation biodroid herself. She sees humans as being irrational and overly emotional, which, to be fair, we kind of are.
Yeah, that is pretty true, and yeah. What's kind of funny in the scene when she's introduced is we have another piece of 80s tech. Now remember, she's half human, half machine, right?
Well, actually, here's the thing with biodroids. They are part machine, but very little. They're actually genetically engineered, i.e. test backgrown, but the only real mechanical part is added extra bit of circuitry to their logical centers of the brain. It acts as an inhibitor towards emotions.
Well, they got that, but she still uses a fax machine.
Well, fax machines were, this is, like I say, 88. That was breaking tech at the time.
which is still just kind of funny. You've got somebody that has, a brain implant, but still has got to be rocking that fax machine. So
Well, to be fair, to this day, if you're in firearm sales, you have to have a fax machine.
that's true, isn't it? So you could get all that various information. So after we get introduced to her, she complains a little bit. She's informed of the terrorist attack. And then we move on to Briarios and Duran Duran meeting up with Hitomi because she allowed them to get into the city. This is where it's still just it's still so weird to see Briarios. He's got this robot head with the giant ears, just dressed in a regular suit, or not even a suit, just like an '80s shirt. It's like it's still just so weird to me.
It is a shock, and it takes forever to get used to. But the thing is, underneath all that metal and plastic, Briarios is actually a real person. He's human. He's completely human. The reason he's underneath all that is because he and Doonan, before they were brought in, were LAPD SWAT before the war, and during the war, they were drafted into the land war. The reason he has all of that metal on him is because right before they were picked up, he was hideously injured.
Oh, so he's doing it Iron Man style.
Pretty much, except the suit don't come off.
Mm. Although, for those who may be wondering, his lower half is at least meaty. So, yeah.
Actually, most of him is. It's artificial. His circulatory system is... His digestive, circulatory, respiratory system are all biological.
And you actually do see him eating like a fucking hamburger later in the movie, too. So, we end up seeing...
He's having a scotch right here at the party.
That is true. So, they go to this party, they get wasted, and then they're interrupted by a massive explosion, because the terrorists are at work again, but this time, of course... They've got giant mech suits. Well, moderately sized mech suits. And everyone...
Yeah. Essentially, the best way to think of it is, if you ever... This is going to be kind of hard for some of the audience, but go out and read the Starship Troopers books. That concept of powered armor. It's not a full mech. It's not, just this really fancy body armor. It's about roughly 12 to 15 feet tall. In this case, neuro-controlled. Through a suit.
And the battle's pretty nice. It's very well animated. They're shooting each other. There's actually taking cover and crap like that. And it's intercut between the battle and the restaurant footage, because everyone's kind of staring off and seeing the explosions and things of that nature. And we know that Briarios is not the only guy that has a robot top half, because there's another guy that you see just in a shirt and pants with a robot head and arms.
Yeah, there's a few people at the party who are augmented, some more than others. One augmented to about the same as Briarios.
It is still... It's just like nobody bats an eyelash at this. It's like, oh, hey, Robo-Man. It's like just shirt and pants, though. It's like, it's the future.
Well, if you think this is a real change, in the manga and some of the later animated versions, which... all these actually link together. It's all one canon. There's no, I disagree with this film. Okay, you're now disagreeing with the entirety of Appleseed. Briarios is actually, in some cases, in a tuxedo.
You gotta love Japan. It's like, that's not even weird to them. That's just, that's almost mundane,
Yeah. Cybernetically augmented, near 7 foot tall individual walking down the street, dressed right to the nines. Yeah, it's Tuesday.
I guess you can get used to anything. So ultimately, the terrorists bust into this building, and they are there to erase some information, and they also end up sending out a phone call to the local news outlet, basically listing off all their demands and things of that nature. Their demands are that humanity doesn't have any control over its destiny, and that the biodroids are keeping the fleshy man down.
Yeah, they're playing off of, oddly enough, thoughts and concepts brought up by George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. That this looks like a paradise, but you got no control. The thing is, you actually still kind of do, but you don't. There is no such thing as utopia, but this is about as close as you're gonna get in sci-fi.
And then, after that, we're introduced to a giant spider tank. Because anime.
Well, not just because anime, but because remember, most of the world might be kind of toasty, still capable of holding life, but toasty. But there are still about 6 major governments of the world. Now, granted, most of them, like Olympus, have become, for lack of a word, Judge Dredd city states without the grimdark. But their chance for war and the need for defense is there. So, while this seems impractical, what makes it practical is the fact that nobody wants to use nukes. The world's already pretty toasty and messed up as it is. We don't need to make it worse. And number two, this thing's actually got a pretty impressive weapons array and pretty impressive armor.
It's what's kind of funny about this scene though is okay, you got the giant mechanical tank, right? It's a giant spider tank. They can also fly because anime. I'm gonna call anime on that one because I don't know how that thing's hovering.
We can only guess that somehow, somewhere, some fan of mecha anime thought, hey, this anti-gravitic drives we read about in sci-fi, that'd be cool. And just like spent 30 years of their life just dedicated to just nothing but that.
And so this scene looks cool. The tank's well animated, except it's so hilarious because it's shooting at a target tank, and like the target tank is like if the target tank was actually working, it would still be destroyed. All you have to do is just step on it. It's like it's a regular tank versus this thing.
This is true. It's kind of goofy in that fact until you realize that what was being fired at that tank were its tertiary weapon systems. Basically, the systems that are being used just as a point defense. It's not even really there for anything more than, oh, well, that's a little too close. I don't want to see it anymore. Bye.
It's a good thing there aren't any planes in this future because it makes for a very easily bombable target. But once again, anime, it's gotta look cool.
Oh yeah, rule of cool. Our aircraft do exist, but for the most part, the only aircraft we see are small-scale hovercraft and, oddly enough, traditional helicopters.
So they don't have to worry about getting burnt-id.
So generally, not unless somebody goes absolutely AWOL and off the plantation and decides, hey, remember those nukes? That was a good idea.
Hey, you never know. People are stupid. So after that really cool tank scene, we move on to this guy named Kellen we saw earlier in the film. We now know he is a traitor to the SWAT because he meets up with the cybernetic assassin. And this is when we learn that Hitomi just so happens to be a biodroid.
Yep. And not only just a biodroid, but one with a genetic key. She was chosen essentially to be the key to the system controlling all of Olympus. She's the key to Gaia.
Now, this is one of those things where, for the movie, it makes sense. It's something simple and easy to understand. But I always have found it kind of. I keep saying funny, but I find it kind of silly. Let's vary up the verbiage a little bit. That a lot of these futuristic super cities, they got the one key that'll turn off the computer that controls everything. That's a pretty big single point failure there.
Well, they actually do make up for it in the fact there are fail-safes and there are multiple locations. She might not be the only key. She's the only key we know. That and the fact that when you have an entire plant that can make biodroids keyed off a genetic phenotype within a very short span, which, if they weren't attacked, which they were, then it starts to make sense.
I suppose, but it's just where it's like... And then, obviously, around this time, they still had the concept of the singular supercomputer versus the distributed computers that we have today, the whole cloud computing thing.
Yeah, cloud computing didn't really happen until the 90s, so...
Yeah, they wouldn't have known about that at the time. So, this is another one of those things where you had to pay attention, because after this, we cut to the SWAT office, and it's a little bit of a comedy relief sort of thing. Somebody's calling for Brierios, but of course he's not there. And the chief answers, and there's a little bit of hilarious back and forth here and there. And it says you need to fix your your video phone camera.
Yeah, we find out there's a reason why that video camera is not quite up to spec. Should have bought a Sony. Kidding. Uh, Essentially, these messages are from an informant. Unfortunately, Briarios and Dunan are no longer. They've transferred from SWAT. They're now on investigations. So they're following up leads left, right, and center. And we do actually cut to a short montage showing them doing their roles as such. So they're not going to be in the SWAT office. They're going to be on the streets in plain clothes.
As plain clothes as a guy with a giant robot head can get. But ultimately, one thing that's actually kind of cool about that little montage that you see, it's not just the whole OVA has some great music to it. But I do like movies, TV shows, whatever, where the heroes actually get to do generic hero stuff, because it really shows that they're always out there kicking ass versus they're doing it one time.
Yeah, make no mistake. While it is a montage, it is just a very quick way to relay that point. It actually does cover what they do in the manga. They are police officers. They've worked investigations with the LAPD before the disaster, before the war, and they'll continue to do so if called upon to do so. They're not just, oh, send us in, we kick doors, we shoot dogs, we blow everything to bits. Sorry, SWAT guys, I know you don't like the shoot dogs part, but we gotta make fun of you.
Because, well, until you guys get robot heads, then we can make fun of that.
Hey, I signed up for it.
All right, so we got another really. There's a lot of good action. There's a lot of good dramatic scenes, and one of the dramatic scenes we end up seeing is them laying to rest Christopher Evans, the guy that got shot at the very beginning of the film. One thing that's kind of funny though is they misspell Christopher.
Transliteration. Understand, this is Studio Gainax in 1988. The only person they had there speaking English was Trish Ledoux.
Now,
go for it.
I was going to say, is that a guy or is that...
That's a woman. That's a woman who would later on go on to control a U.S. media group known as Viz. Not to be confused with the UK Viz for anybody from the United Kingdom watching this. Completely different. She did a lot of good, but she also did a lot of bad. After this, she almost killed Studio Gainax. Remember, this is Gainax before Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Which I still need to watch.
Yes and no. But regardless, because of the fact the only person there speaking English was Trish Ledoux, you're going to get a lot of transliteration. Understand that Japanese L's and R's don't exactly go, and remember, they're working off of phonetics. So, best case I can ever give is, like I say, having watched 3 versions, Officer Colon is referred to as Karen in some. So that'll throw you for a loop.
Now, of course, if you say Officer Colon, that also doesn't help very much either.
Yeah, it's Callan, at almost as akin to Colin, but it's spelled Calon. But like I say, transliteration and accents make it really strange, especially when you go from sub to dub. It'll throw you for a loop.
Now, watching it just with the sub, I know him now as Colin or Colin. We're just gonna call him Colin from now on because it's funny and he's a bad guy.
Officer Colin Blow.
So Officer Colin here ends up talking to Briarios and Duran, and we get kind of an interesting little speech here. Basically, he's saying that he's talking about how his wife died, and how he started thinking after his wife was basically complaining about them being in a zoo, which is a very Japanese way of saying of them being like in a prison, and he started thinking about how that might actually be true, and how 80% of everyone living in that city is a biodroid. So that's a pretty small proportion of humans, just saying.
Well, understand that there's a reason for it. The biodroids are actually there to act as a buffer for humans. Basically, Psychology-wise, this actually is double-edged, and it does show that this is, while it may look like a utopia, it's actually a dystopia. People are being brought in piecemeal from the survivors of the war from outside areas, but they have to be chosen carefully because they have to follow certain mental profiles. There's no use bringing in the next Ted Bundy into a mega city just to watch him kill, half the population. But the problem is in psychology. They're working off of the positive role model example. You have enough positivity around you, and you have enough means, you have everything supplied to you. Chances are you're not going to be violent, you're not going to be unpredictable, you're not going to be irrational and or go psychopathic or sociopathic. Hence the reason for the biodroids. As for the other side of this equation, it comes into play a little bit later from Kellen's eyes. But from here, Kellen expresses that he doesn't feel free, that he doesn't have to strive for anything. He doesn't have to. There's no conflict. Which I would love to be in the world he's living in, because from my own world and the world he was just in, but doesn't quite see, there was a hostage situation. There's plenty of conflict.
Exactly. I think what he's really going on about is that for the average human, there's nothing to really work for, and that could be a multi-hour long conversation in and of itself. Of, if you ever did reach the point where you had all your needs fulfilled and you never had to worry about anything, would you be truly happy? I mean, from where we're both sitting, like, yeah, but there is that idea of there's always something else I can do later. But what if there was nothing else you could do? You reach that plateau and there's no getting any higher.
Well, essentially it's the Starfleet problem. You look back to Star Trek and they're functioning on roughly the same idea, but there's always going to be that desire to go forward, to improve yourself, to improve your lot in life. The spirit of capitalism, exactly what it is. But it's also proof that a true utopia will never work. So the best we can hope for is really what's presented in Olympia. Basically, here's the best we can give you, here's the best we can do. There's always going to be problems, but we can work for a brighter tomorrow.
Which works, but I still think like the movie's trying to portray the lot of the humans as like, you have your place in the utopia, but you're never actually going to have any real power, because it does say that the biodroids are the ones controlling everything. So,
well, in this part of the timeline, it's actually true. You're not going to be in control. You're not going to have that control. Now, in terms of the overall timeline, it kind of switches to and fro. It's never a one-sided humans bad sort of thing, or technology bad kind of thing. It's the key of it is there's a happy medium that has to be maintained, which is actually a pretty surprising message for something that's generally treated as popcorn disposable entertainment.
Yeah, it's way deeper than you'd think. I mean, you think it's a guy with a robot head and a woman shooting things with 1911s, but it's actually a lot going on. So after Cullen gives his little speech, Duran here actually is kind of weirded out. Like, there's a scene where she's like looking at all the people running around. It's like, how many of those are biodroids and how many of those are humans? So she's starting to kind of question what's going on.
Very much so. I mean, you cannot tell visually. I mean, you can. The only way you think you can tell is if a person has cybernetic augmentations. You can't tell if they're a biodroid or human until you start really trying to push them into a point of anger or irrational behavior. Biodroids still can kind of be semi-irrational, but nowhere to the same degree as a human can.
So basically, people who are overly nice, don't trust them. I don't trust them in real life either. They're planning something.
Generally a good rule of thumb, but also be afraid of the person who has tie-dye colored hair and hates you for just breathing.
Well, see, at least then they're being honest about it. But
are they really? Maybe they're just being narcissistic to the point of they've always got to be something to be angry about, otherwise they feel empty.
Well, there's that, and I'm angry when I'm out of chocolate, so yeah.
Fair enough.
But chocolate anger aside, we eventually move on to the climax of the film, which comes around the 33-minute mark, at least from what I'm looking at here. Pretty much everything is set up and ready to go. We know who Hitomi is, and we know pretty much what the terrorists want to do. And what that essentially is Colin wants to shut down Gaia so that humanity can potentially have some freedom. At least that's what he's thinking. The robo-assassin ends up killing this informant that was going to actually kind of spill the whole thing. He's actually there for a completely different reason. He's actually there to steal the robo-tank because, well, big fuck-off tank that can fly.
Well, not just that. He's actually there to steal the tank, the multipede, but his main mission is to deliver it to unknown forces just outside the border awaiting him. We never know which particular nation wants it. And I hate to say this, even if you read the manga, even if you follow this universe through both the anime and the manga, you never find out.
Damn. Well, I'm just going to say it's China because, yeah.
It could actually be what's left of the Imperial States of America.
No! Well, Imperial, not an empire.
Well, not yet, but after World War, which deteriorates most of the U.S., the Southeast, to include Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, and most of the Southern Panhandle, become their own nation.
Well, you know what? I'm just going to blame it on Beto anyway. But...
Oh, he's long dead.
Oh. Beto Jr.
Okay.
So, Beto Jr. is the one that tried to steal the tank. That's what we're going to say, at least. So, Beto Jr. aside, the final conclusion, actually, it's kind of... There's one part of this that kind of annoys me. Because it's a common media trope that just... I feel like it's there for filler. Towards the end, Duran and Robohead end up getting falsely accused, and they get arrested during the middle of one of the battles. And it's like, come on, really? Do they always have to do that?
Yeah, but at least it explains somewhat reasonably here. Athena's going off of very, very little data. All she knows is there is indeed somebody in the police department who is never specified if it was ESWAT or not, but there is somebody in the police department who is leaking data to known terrorists. As Dune and Newt and Briarios have closest contacts with Hitomi, kind of makes some degree of sense because, well, they were the last people seen with them. And to Athena, Hitomi's disposable. Hitomi, she's a good person, and we're basically see that through her actions, but all the data that refers to her being a lock, the last key to the lock, that's something they can create another one.
And that actually is a plot point in the film, and, Duran and Robohead definitely get kind of pissed off at that very concept.
Yeah, when you have a nice person that you've grown to like, and you found out that, okay, well, they're not entirely human. I mean, they have the same feelings as human. They're just less irrational, and they were created in a lab. And you go to that, and you start to realize it, and you realize somebody's saying, yeah, they're disposable. We don't care about them. That would kind of hit you, too.
Yeah, I'd say.
Especially more so as explored in the manga, but I'll save that for a bit of a wrap-up.
All right, so we got the final battle. Basically, Colin is trying to deliver Hitomi to this last lock. They've blown up all the other ones, and I feel that's a little extreme. They could have just shut them down or unplugged them, but hey, it's the 80s.
It's one of those that they're disposable. We can rebuild it. It's not that big of a deal. Because let's face it, you've already built a mega city which holds millions. What's one lock when you have the example to remake the tech like that? We're not talking Adeptus Mechanicum here, where it takes 13 years to make an air conditioning unit. We must pray to it. We must dab it with oil. No, this isn't like that. This is tech is nice, but it's ultimately replaceable.
And so, as you would expect, she does, of course, enter this last key, or last lock, I should say, and shuts down the main computer. And that's when all hell ends up breaking loose even more than it already had been. The tank gets captured. The city pretty much just shuts down.
Yeah, anything that's not independently powered, powers off.
And that probably ended up killing like a shitload of people.
Yeah, anybody who was hospitalized, unless they had a backup generator to those hospitals, done. You're just sorry, you're dead.
And various wrecks and things of that. And there's a really cool scene with Briareos and Duran Duran on a bike. They end up just powering through this massive amount of traffic, and they're all trying to hit. Duran Duran and Briareos is trying to get to the main computer building so they can potentially turn it back on. And we'll get to how they turn it on in a minute because it's kind of silly. While this is happening, the giant fuck-off spider tank is flying around smashing stuff.
Because he can. If you have all of these great weapon systems, you've got at least, 8 weapon systems on one tank, and it's a tank that flies, and it's pretty much all but invulnerable to most arms that are available to the area. Would you go Godzilla on it?
And he does. So they finally make it to this main computer facility, and this I think Batman Beyond ended up taking some ideas from this, because there's a whole bunch of
sci-fi ended up taking a lot of ideas from this.
I'll say so, because of course the main computer area is guarded by laser turrets and things of that nature, like the power plant was in Batman Beyond.
Yeah, and these aren't, oh look, lasers, they'll slice you up a bit, they'll just, no, these are more than enough to go through even Briareos' armor. In fact, that's exactly what happens.
But he doesn't die, thankfully.
Yeah, basically, they're running down the hallway, each one's popping up. Duden gets 2 good shots off with her 1911. The second one's the last, because as she shoots that laser, it basically lets off a shot, destroying her 1911.
No, but moving on.
Briareos is hit by 2. We see immediately he's hit in the leg. He offers basically to provide cover fire for our heroes, Athena and Dunan, as they run down the hallway. And he does provide exceptional cover fire.
With the space AR. Actually, I'm not going to call it a space AR simply because it's a bullpup, and in the 80s, the bullpup was like, that's going to be the futuristic thing, man.
Yeah, essentially it's a 12mm AP bullpup, but he's using it like an assault rifle.
Because, well, he's a robo-man.
Pretty much.
Then we got another cool. The fact is, this is this, like Black Magic M66, has so much intelligence to it. Okay, so you got your main computer, right? It's shut down. You can't do anything with it. In a lesser sci-fi, be it a movie, TV show, whatever, they would log into the computer inside the facility, and it would somehow magically work. In this, they got to go through all the hard copies trying to figure out how can we fix the computer.
No, it's not so much fixing it as, okay, there's a lot, the lock is engaged on Gaia. It's powered off from a certain core point. So they're sitting there pouring through papers and diagrams, figuring, okay, well, this works here, this works here. Where's the thing we've got to either flip, smash, or cut off to get power back to the main system? And they find it.
Yeah, and Gaia evidently must be like, a phone or an MP3 player or something like that, because effectively what they have to do is they have to shoot the little reset button. Well, it's not even a button, the little reset thing. Like on a phone where you have to stick a needle in there to reset the thing?
In this case, it's a bit like a fuse that, if you ever dealt with electronic locks in real life, some of them have a fuse which will actually disable the lock for emergency purposes. In this particular case, it's a lot like that. The only problem is that it's about a good solid 120 feet up. It's not exactly in the best location.
Which makes sense, but once again, it's just like, why would you design your magic space computer to be... You can reset it by shooting it.
Well, it's the same concept as a fuse. If you take the fuse out, if you remove it, you've stopped the flow of electricity. That's basically what's it. It's up. Gaia is offline because it's having its power routed to tertiary systems. In this case, the defense grid to make sure nobody re-engages it. So essentially, what they're shooting at is essentially a lot like removing a fuse. It's basically a failsafe of a failsafe of a failsafe.
I guess that makes a little more sense, but still. And the thing is, I'm not saying it's stupid. I'm just saying it's like you want to have your main character do something particularly cool, and they do. She's got to shoot it with this 1911. It's beautiful. It is pure gun porn. It is so well drawn. You can even see Hartford, Connecticut on the frame.
Yep, even down to the serial number, and it is a Colt 1911 M1911A1, slightly modified two-tone model.
I never was a big fan of two-tone. But anyway, she ends up hitting it like on the last shot. Although if I want to be like an anti-1911 guy, which I don't, but I'm going to make fun of it anyway. Well, if she had, one of those high-capacity magazine pistols like, say, Glock or an MMP, which in the 1980s didn't exist, she'd have plenty of shots, wouldn't she? That's kind of limiting there.
I would have gone with a Beretta M9A1, but even back then, while it was higher capacity, almost double the ammo, there's the problem of not a lot of what they face would the 9mm be the wisest choice.
Especially when you're dealing with robots. 45 just packs a little more punch. During the little shooting segment, we get sort of like a Obi-Wan Kenobi moment with Briareos. She's imagining Briareos like telling her how to shoot. And also, the firing pin is drawn on that 1911. It's beautiful.
They got the firing pin block, safety. Even the plunger assembly is drawn. It is a part for part animated section of the general breakdown of the 1911. I can hand you a technical document package right now and compare it to the anime, and it's one for one.
And if that wasn't beautiful enough, she shoots it, it shuts down the big fuck-off spider tank, and the ending... This anime really surprised me when I first saw it. It's kind of like... Very few movies really surprised me. When I first saw Commando, and Schwarzenegger pops in with his HK-91, and the guy's like, "You have to cooperate, right?" And Schwarzenegger's like, "Wrong." I was like, "What?" I was not expecting that. I was like, "Oh, he's going to have to work with him." Nope. And so, the same thing happens here, where the big fuck-off spider tank crashes, and the robo-assassin pops out, and you would think, oh, somehow Duran Duran and Robohead showed up and there's going to be this big climactic fight, right?
Nope.
They just shoot him in the head.
AJ Sebastian takes a 12mm AP round right to the dome. Dead center. You couldn't ask for a better shot.
It's like the end. It's perfect because it's... One of the big problems with, especially modern-day anime, is they really like to draw out those final climactic fights where they're constantly jumping around and everything. This just did shoot him in the head.
This isn't even my final form. Shut up. Blam!
Yeah. And, of course, the film ends on a happy note with Duran Duran and Briareos just sitting around talking with Hitomi. And the final scene of the movie is Duran Duran walking around... the head of the city looks at her and then drives away. The end.
Yeah, basically, Briareos has about a week of recovery on the biological parts, and a couple of days before the new parts come in for his leg, which he jokes with before the battle's done, before they're finally deactivate the computer. He jokes with Noonan, "After this, you're shopping with me for a new leg."
You had to go to the Gap. That was a popular 80s thing. Does the Gap even still exist?
I think they do. I'd have to check on NYSE.
God. But anyway. So yeah, that is, of course, Appleseed, the OVA.
Now, like I say, as I've said before, to kind of wrap it up, on the vision from Colin's point of view, the reason why psychologically this matters is his wife died of taking her own life because she felt she wasn't free. His thoughts are reinforced by the fact that his wife, before she killed herself, was seeing psychological counseling. when he would not cooperate with the counselors as they showed up at his door, they took him. And they basically took his memories from him. They have a machine which can go through and read memory. Well, that's when he realized he was being treated like, a rat in a cage. Which, cue Billy Corgan song here. This actually kind of goes to show that this is actually a lot more complex of an anime than you should be have any right to be, because they show both the good side of psychology and the bad side. The good side, and the fact they're all, most of the city is a buffer for humanity. It's basically put there via the biodroids and their positive interactions with the human populace. They're there not just to mind the city and not to be some replacement for humanity. They're there to aid humanity. But on the flip side, you also have the cold start bureaucracy of it all, the corporate bureaucracy of it all, which will take a victim if they will not cooperate it, and they will essentially mind rape him, stealing his memories. That's a very personal intrusion of personal space. That's more so than like saying being caught naked when changing. That's life changing.
And that's actually something I was actually going to bring that up, but actually ended up forgetting. That is something that really goes to show that the city. Some would actually probably argue that that's okay, if that way people don't have mental health problems if they can't remember them, right? Well, it does make the question is, how did he remember in the first place?
Oh, they didn't strip his memories. They just basically played them back. Memories are still the same. He's been stewing in this headspace for a year.
Oh, oops. Because now that's really stupid when you think about it. It's like, why would you... Well, if you... I can understand why the biodroids would do that, because the biodroids aren't fully human, so they
Well, no, it wasn't biodroids. It was basically the city's the people the psychological managers that took him against his will were human.
Now, see, I didn't actually pick up on that, because I was actually thinking they were biodroids. That's even worse. It's like, what did they think was going to happen?
Yeah, at both times, it's some of the planning for the city. The city is basically planned by a corporation. It's a group of corporations operating in a post-UN. Yes, the UN is destroyed in this universe environment. And they have a fundamental grasp of psychology, but they also have a fundamental misunderstanding of psychology. You don't ever take a person who's suffering from PTSD, survivor's guilt, or depression and put them through that. You're just going to create a time bomb. And they didn't understand that.
Which, to me, seems a bit strange. Like, if you have that level of technology, surely there's going to be some documents that survive that would show that that'd be a bad idea. Just basic logic would tell you that.
Well, that's just it. It shows the complexity of this in the fact that, yes, there are documents that are left, but how many in our current political climate refuse to acknowledge those documents?
I see, that's an interesting... You get all this from an anime with a guy with rabbit ears on his head and a lot of shooty. That's anime in and of itself, isn't it? You know?
Now, granted, this is just a short snippet into the Appleseed universe. Everything is a straight timeline. It's all canon. But even in its simplicity, even in this, just very quick and dirty, let's get Masamune Shiro's idea out there in an animated form as quickly, as cost-effectively, and as to the point as possible. They still manage to make you think upon further viewing.
And I think that's why anime has been blowing up quite like it has over the past, 20 years? 30 years now?
It's been closer to about... since anime's first introduction to the U.S., it's getting close to 40.
My God, I'm old.
We're not counting like Tetsujin and Tetsuwan Atom, things like that, which were just clubbed as opposed to dubbed.
Yeah, I wouldn't really count the 70s stuff. Also like Speed Racers, Star Blazers, or stuff like that. That was fairly simplistic stuff. But this kind of more...
the U.S. dub of Star Blazers was. Space Battleship Yamato, while it does have some tropes to it, it's actually not that simple. It's pretty deep.
Hmm. I've not actually seen that, to be honest, but I have been aware of it. But that being said, it's easy to see why fans of anime can definitely dig deep into a lot of this stuff because there's a lot there. If you compare an OVA such as this to a similar American production, the American production is going to be a lot simpler. I guess Western production, because it might not necessarily come from America. There's just so much what's going on in Western productions. It's very simple and to the point, both thematically and in terms of story. Whereas something that is theoretically as simple as Appleseed can just have so much going on under the surface that upon first viewing you might see the shooty robo ears guy, but when you actually look at it, there's just such a massive amount of bedrock to this stuff.
Yeah, everything is. It starts with a grounded foundation, a very solid one, and for the most part, it'll drag you into the bells and whistles and all that, all the visual flair. But once you actually start, rewatching and paying very, very close attention and just thinking off certain ideas, you can be shocked about how deep this rabbit hole can go.
All from something called Appleseed.
It's definitely a change, and now I don't know if I should reveal the third meaning behind Appleseed because it is a spoiler for the manga. And I want everybody who's watching this, please support the original release. Buy the manga. Watch the anime. It's worth it. It's that good.
Well, I think we'll just call it a day. Call it a video here, and leave that third one uncovered. And so, I am Generallotz, and I'm going to wish you good Trigon.
And I'm Reignick, and I'm going to wish you a good Subaru hand cannon, or in 1911 if you prefer.
Whatever makes you happy.